Well, thank you, Josiah, for spending all the time to make that a little more family-friendly. One of my favorite movies, but I noticed this about 80s movies of all kind, because we're always like telling our daughter, like, they were great, you got to watch them. And we watched Planes, Trains, and Automobiles at Thanksgiving this year, and you forget, like, the language is horrible, so thank you very much. Although, I woke up Saturday morning, and I had put the original clip in Dropbox for the service for him to... family-friendly eyes, shall we say, to censor. And then I had this thought of like, we're going to put the wrong clip in. So I'm glad we didn't do that again this year. That would have been the worst start for Christmas. But I don't know about your family. I love me some Christmas movies. And we're looking for a new Christmas movie because we tend to watch the same old Christmas movies all the time. Now, there are lots of new ones. Have you ever just gone into like Netflix? We do that all the time and just go and just say Christmas, or Amazon and just say Christmas into the remote, and like 11 billion movies pop up. But then you start reading the descriptions. Here's some actual descriptions. I want to do this. We sit there sometimes for, I want to say hours, it's probably like 60 seconds, but reading these descriptions going, how about this one? Due to unforeseen road closure, 8 strangers are forced to take refuge in an abandoned church during a snowstorm. During their time together, they learn from one another how to manage through various personal, don't you want them to get in some sort of death fight or something? No. And here's another one. These were taken right from my cue the other day. When champion figure skater Claire becomes injured, she's sent to a rehabilitation center in the snowy mountains where she meets and falls for a local ice fisherman who shows her there's more to life than competition. I bet he does. A cynical TV exec. This is another one, looks at a perfect town inside a Christmas snow globe and is magically transported into it. And he wakes up in a perfect snow-covered town. Oh, wait a minute, I read that wrong. When she wakes up in a perfect snow-covered town, although it could be either, married to a local woodsman, which there are lots of woodsmen around, she discovers it's not all fantasy. And this actually popped up the other day. Kirk Cameron provides a biblical basis for our favorite time-honored traditions and inspiration to stay strongly against a culture that wants to... I don't know how to get a new Christmas movie, but I do know this. And so actually, my daughter and I have this game that we try to do, but we can't do it. I'm always like, why don't we just bring up the Christmas section and then close our eyes and just hold the remote down and then let off and just watch whatever comes up, kind of like bad Christmas movie roulette. And we've tried to do it a couple times, but like we bail every time. We don't have the strength to make it through a bad Christmas movie, but we're really looking, and maybe you can put one in the in one of the talkback cards, a great Christmas movie we could watch. But we tend to watch the same old ones. But one thing I've noticed through the new ones we've tried and all the descriptions we've read over the last couple years, that every Christmas movie sort of has like a bad relationship and bad situations, and bad weather is always part of it. Even Santa Paws 2. Now that was not as good as Santa Paws 1. Santa Claus 2. Now I do like that one a lot, where kittens save Christmas and fly the sleigh. But there's always sort of bad relationships and bad weather and bad situations, or sometimes it's just a bad movie. If you don't have any of those things, write it off. But it made me realize this. As a connoisseur of Christmas movies, as someone that occasionally watches a Christmas movie in October because we love them so much, that I realized this, like, you wouldn't want to wake up in a Christmas movie, right? You really wouldn't. Like, we've entered this last circle of hell. That's what Clark Griswold said, or the 7th circle of hell. I mean, you wouldn't want to wake up in A Christmas Story. You wouldn't want to wake up where your boss is a jerk and you're not getting that bonus you thought you were, and you're in the Jelly of the Month Club, and your brother-in-law comes with his RV. All the things that are so much fun to watch. Man, that'd be terrible. Like, you wouldn't want to wake up in a Christmas movie where you find out you have a son, which happens more and more now thanks to genetic testing, and he thinks he's an elf, and he comes to your house and tears your entertainment center apart and makes a Rocky Horse and puts 3 cookies in your VCR. I mean, it would be terrible. Like, this is a nightmare. You would not want to wake up in a Christmas movie where Nakamichi Tower has been taken over by weird European terrorists. And now this, I just have to take 15 minutes, we could talk about this. Why do they always have some sort of perfectly well-lit ventilation system that you can crawl through? This is becoming a pet peeve in every movie, but Die Hard is very bad about that. So if you notice, actually every ventilation system in a movie like this is not only big enough to crawl through, it's sturdy enough to crawl through, and it has lights in it. What are we lighting these things for, like squirrels? I don't know. Well, that would work here because we actually have squirrels in our ventilation system at Action Church. But you would not want to wake up in Die Hard, ho, 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 now I have a machine. Actually, that would be kind of cool. I'm just saying. But you wouldn't want to wake up in a Christmas movie. You know, in a Christmas Story, where I love the fact that as much as that's one of my favorite Christmas movies, and we always say Daddy's going to kill Ralphie, and my dad was a great furnace fighter, but you wouldn't want to wake up in that world. It would be a nightmare where all you want is a BB gun, and your parents actually wait till the very end. His dad punks him and finally gives him the BB gun, and he has to wear the bunny suit. But every one of these situations, you definitely wouldn't want to wake up in this Christmas movie, right? Like, this is a Christmas movie, and you do not want to wake up where these little guys are around. Do not feed them after midnight, and you do not want to wake up in Polar Express. Actually, I've never woke up in Polar Express because I have never made it all the way through the movie because it's so boring. Oh my God, you don't want to wake up. I'm sorry, it is. I want to wake up in a Christmas commercial. Like, that's the way to live, right? In Christmas commercials, everything's great. Phil Swift has the answer for everything. We learned that last year. I mean, you get a Lexus with a giant bow on it. You've got this beautiful sort of marginally diverse family, and they're all happy, and brothers and sisters are getting along, and dogs and cats live together in harmony, and soldiers come home. And I mean, you want to wake up in a Christmas commercial. You do not want to wake up in a Christmas movie or a Christmas story. And I've been thinking a lot about that because it's different to try to sell somebody something like commercials do, right? Like, they're selling us something. They're selling us a brand, or selling us a story, or selling us an idea that, hey, if you just buy these presents, you'd be filled with joy, like we talked about last week. I've noticed that a lot. In fact, Josiah preached last week about joy, and I was sending him pictures today. Like, I walked into Cole, and it said, give joy, get joy. I was like, yeah, now I know how to do it with Cole's Bucks, and they'll give you money back. It's great. But I was thinking, like, the people that are trying to sell us something, Christmas looks fantastic. But the people who write Christmas stories, from Charles Dickens on, it's different, isn't it, right? When we're supposed to feel something. That's what every one of those stupid Christmas movies is. That's why there's 10,000 of them, because they are popular, because we want to watch them. And I don't know about you, but that's when I get that Christmas feeling, when I watch, like, A Christmas Story for the 10,000th time, or I watch Elf the first time in the year. It's like, oh, it's Christmas. And so the people who try to make us feel something, or help us to feel something, that Christmas spirit, there's always trouble, there's always bad relationships, there's always bad situations, there's always weather, there's always difficulty. And so I've been thinking, and I've put together this postulate, probably because I have a kid that's in geometry, and I've heard a lot about postulates lately. And a postulate is just something that's true, but there's no sort of direct proof for it. Like, you know, a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. That's always going to be true, but it's not. There's no way to directly prove that. And so I've come to think, and we're going to talk this month about this idea that good things actually come out of the worst Christmases. That if you look at, anything about Christmas, if you look at Christmas movies and Christmas stories, and we're going to go into the original Christmas story in the Bible, it's sort of the worst things bring us a feeling, but more than that, they bring us hope and joy and things that we learn. And so I want to talk to you about that first worst Christmas. Now, I think the best place to read this is from Luke, and we're gonna read this morning. And it says, this is the way the birth of Jesus came about. And so in Luke 2, it says these words. It says, at that time, the Roman Emperor Augustus decreed that a census should be taken throughout the Roman Empire. And this is the first census taken when Quirinius was governor of Syria. And all returned to their ancestral towns to register for the census. And because Joseph was a descendant of King David, he had to go to Bethlehem in Judea, David's ancient home. And he traveled there from the village of Nazareth in Galilee. And he took with him Mary, to whom he was engaged, who was now expecting a child. And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. And she gave birth to her firstborn son. And she wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no lodging available to him. Now, before we get into this story, and it is the original Christmas story, I want to read you one other thing. I want to read you a message from the person who wrote these words. Now, Luke we don't know his last name, but we do know he was a physician, and he starts off this whole story, this whole account by saying this. He said, many people have set out to write accounts about the events that have been fulfilled among us. And we know that's true because there's 3 other letters, 3 other stories, we call them gospels in the Bible about Jesus' birth, life, and death. But notice Luke says something different than all the others because we don't get a lot of little baby Jesus in the other ones. They sort of say, in the beginning was the Word, or this is how Jesus came about. But notice what Luke says. He said, they used eyewitness reports circulating among us from the early disciples. Having carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I also have decided to write an accurate account for you, most honorable Theophilus, that's who commissioned him, so you can be certain of the truth of everything you were taught. So Luke is saying, as a physician, as a sort of at that time, a man of science, like, I'm going to give you all of the evidence of Jesus being the Son of God. And that's why we get this really detailed account, which I'm glad of. And I just wanted to tell you, like, this, the reason why we have this is because Luke went to the trouble of saying, I want to know how this started. Not just Jesus burst on the scene and started preaching. I want to hear the story of baby Jesus. And so it's funny that we've read it so many times, or we've seen it in the Peanuts cartoon, or we've heard it in Sunday school, and maybe this is your first time you've ever read it. I feel sorry for you because you're like, I'm in this weird box, and there's lights everywhere, and there's 2 Noel candles, and I don't understand what they're doing, and that guy can't read very well. I get it. So, but I'm betting that wasn't the first time you heard this count. But the problem with that is we sort of get, I call them Bible goggles, like we read something so many times and you just go, oh yeah, Jesus was born in a cute little stable and, with the animals nearby. But listen to this. It says, at that time the Roman Emperor Augustus decreed a census. It should be taken throughout the Roman Empire. This is a real thing, and they actually say that was the first census taken when Quirinius. This is a real event, and it causes big problems. It's a big disruptive problem. Like maybe the reason why all these other Christmas stories throughout the ages, maybe the reason why every Christmas story has some, won't you guide my sleigh at night moment is because they're following this pattern of there's a big problem. And if you notice, it says then that Joseph didn't happen to live in his hometown. Now, we sort of take that for granted because we move all over. Now, I think York is a little different because I meet a lot of people in York that have actually lived here their whole life. I'm from the Midwest, and quite frankly, everyone leaves the Midwest. So, like, if you look at my family, there were 7 of us, and it looks like a bomb went off in our living room and just scattered us over the United States. No offense to Missouri, but we got out of there. But I know some of you have stayed here your whole life, but that was pretty common in those times also. Like most people didn't travel, most people didn't move long distances, but for some reason, we find that Joseph wound up living 90 miles, that's a long way, from his ancestral home. Like York to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. If you ever went to Allentown, Bethlehem, that's 90 miles. And imagine walking that, or, just imagine the governor going, hey, you're going to have to go to Bethlehem, and you're going to have to walk there. And we would have pitchforks out. We don't have pitchforks anymore. I don't know what we'd find our TV remotes, and we would throw them at him. We would be really angry if we had to, go all the way to Allentown, Bethlehem on foot. It's a big deal. It's a big problem. And then it says he took with him Mary, to whom he was engaged, who was now expecting a child. And that's another thing I think that we sort of take for granted. I kind of go, yeah, of course you would go with him, but why? Why wasn't she at home with her family taking care of her? It's not totally evident. It's just not obvious that you just take her with her on a dangerous journey where you have to walk. I mean, something's going on. There's some sort of, I would call this the relationship problem of this, because if it wasn't that she had relationship problems at home, as she probably did, because she probably was sort of ostracized, because here she's a pregnant, unmarried young woman who might not be a huge deal post-Juno 2018. Wouldn't be fun in a family, but imagine, 2,100 years ago, and she says, oh, by the way, God did it. That is a problem in her family. It brings shame to her family. No one's happy with Mary. No one's happy with Joseph. For some reason, that causes him to have to take her with him and put her in that dangerous situation. Or he felt like he needed to be with her, but that's not the way it worked back then. Like when my dad had 7 kids, I don't think he ever went in the delivery room. Now we're right there, and for better or worse, it's like, wow, now I know how that works. That's scary. And there's that moment when your child is born, the longest, 12 seconds in life, when they're looking at the kid and you go, oh, everything's okay, or not, hopefully. But here's the thing, for some reason we take this for granted. Joseph thought, the best thing I can do is take my extremely pregnant fiance with me on this long and dangerous and really, really uncomfortable journey. That's the only way we can think about this, is imagine going, I remember when your wife is about, or in this case your fiance is about ready to deliver, you really think carefully about going out to dinner. Are you cool with this? Are we good to go? But literally hey, let's walk for 90 miles, or in the many times we see her riding a donkey. I'm not sure that's better. I think if you've ever ridden a horse, a donkey has got to be a nightmare to go across this rough terrain for days. And then this part sounds so sort of innocent. And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. So, 2 possibilities. One possibility is she's earlier than they thought. It's not like they have 22 sonograms. Maybe she's earlier, or maybe he thought any minute we're going to have a baby, which speaks to the fact that what was wrong at home, that they didn't just leave her there with her family, because that's how you had a baby. You didn't go to a hospital. There weren't hospitals. So your great aunt and your mom and all the women who had had many children before and knew what to do and knew how to handle it, they took care of it. But instead, it says, while they were there, the time came for a baby to be born. And then it says she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger. And then Luke goes, oh, by the way, here's why she would lay him in a manger: because there was no lodging available for them. Because this big problem, this idea that, everybody has to pay taxes in their hometown, that everybody has to go sign up for the situation in their hometown, everybody has to show up there, so all of a sudden there's no lodging. And then he says, oh, by the way, not only does she have her baby when they're 90 miles from home, her first baby, probably a very young girl, she has it in a manger, in a stable. Oh my goodness. Now, here's the thing, that's so easy to go, oh yeah, that's the Christmas story, that's adorable. Let me ask you this, you would not want to wake up in this story. I wouldn't want to wake up in a barn with a cat having kittens. That would be terrifying. I've been around a cat having kittens. I first saw it when I was 5 years old, and I ran in and told my mom, our cat's blowing a bubble with her butt. And she goes, hang on, there's something happening you don't understand. And I learned a big lesson that day. But here's the thing, that was terrifying. I grew up on a farm. It's I've seen cows born in a barn, and it is frightening. If you were the only one there, should I call the vet? But somehow they know how to do that. But imagine. I'm probably not I'm sounding really manny, aren't I here? But here's the thing, imagine you're in a barn by yourself, and all your ladies are going, yeah, that would be terrible from my perspective. Yeah, I know, but I can't even imagine that part. That's beyond me. But I'm even thinking for Joseph going, can you imagine being in a barn by yourself with someone you love having her first child? Nobody to help, nobody to tell you, no YouTube. At least we have YouTube. Like, I would be YouTubing the crap out of this, wouldn't you? Like, what do I do now? Like, but he's in a barn by himself, someone who has not helped a woman give birth. That's not what guys did back then. And man, that'd be terrifying for you and me, wouldn't it? Like, that would be a problem. That would be. So here's the thing, like, I was thinking, like, wow, I would not want to wake up in this Christmas story. Not even counting like all the drama that's going to come. Not even counting like, oh, and then King Herod's looking for this baby and wants to kill it. Not even counting like, oh, they're going to have to move to a foreign land. None of that. Just like I'm in a barn with my fiance who's having her first child and there's no one to help and we're all alone and we have nothing. And then you read on, it's like, oh, but good news, God sends a Christmas miracle. Now, I don't know, like, when I read this story, I'm like, I don't know if that's what I would have chose, but I know it's probably not what Mary and Joseph would have prayed for, at least. I mean, if you're Mary and Joseph, I think you're praying for, like, a nice team of medical professionals with an epidural, right? Like, that's what you want in this situation. Like, you want Chicago obstetrics or whatever the new Chicago is. Like, you want somebody that can help you in this situation, and you want that epidural early. That's the one thing I know about childbirthing. But like, here's the thing, like, that would be a good Christmas miracle, right? Or if you have to go through that, I mean, that's, I can't even imagine Mary's position. I'm still thinking it from Joseph's side, going, oh, that'd be terrifying. But Mary, oh, at least you want Chip and Joanna Gaines to show up, right? Like, throw up some shiplap, make it pretty. Like, they could turn that manger into something really nice. I've seen them do it. The other day I was watching it, and they had like a little barn in the backyard, and they turned it into a gardening shed. And I was like, I don't even garden, and I want to live in that thing. So like, imagine, like, or they'd say, like, this is your brand new stable. Like, look what we've done. Look at the shiplap. I mean, we've got a custom table here for you, and it's beautiful. Something like that would have been a miracle. Or like even Rudolph, like, won't you guide my sleigh tonight? Like, that would have been a good miracle, right? Like, okay, here's the thing, not to be gross, Mary, but like you had to ride a donkey for 90 miles. I'm betting you don't want to do that on the way home. Like, we'll whisk you up. It's not going to be good. But instead, God sends shepherds. It says that night, there were shepherds staying in the fields nearby, guarding their flocks of sheep. And suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared among them, and the radiance of God's glory surrounded them, and they were terrified. But the angel reassured them, don't be afraid, he said. I bring you good news that will bring great joy to all people. One of my favorite verses in the Bible, all people. Like, Jesus' advent coming onto the scene actually can bring joy not just to the people who were even looking for him, but to everyone. He makes everything better when we allow him. The Savior. Yes, the Messiah. From the very beginning, he said, no, not a prophet, not a good guy, not a teacher. The Messiah, the Lord, has been born today in Bethlehem, the city of David. And you will recognize him by this sign. You will find a baby snugly wrapped in strips of cloth lying in a manger. And the angels are saying to the shepherds, and they tell them, like, hey, guess what? This was all part of the plan from the beginning. God knew this isn't a mistake. Like, guess what? This is a sign to you that this baby is laying there in a manger. And then it says, suddenly the angel was joined by a vast host of others, the armies of heaven, praising God and saying, glory to God in highest heaven, peace on earth to those with whom God is pleased. When the angels had returned to heaven, the shepherds said to each other, let's go to Bethlehem and let's see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about. And they hurried to the village, and they found Mary and Joseph, and there was the baby lying in the manger. See, that's a Christmas miracle. And I know I say this every year, but it's not Christmas magic. Like, Christmas magic is the team of surgeons. Christmas magic is Rudolph, won't you guide my sleigh tonight? Christmas magic that we write about and we read about and we sing about in our idea of Christmas here as pagans in 2018 is magic, but this is a miracle. And I want to read on because it's interesting to think about what happens next. It says, after seeing him, the shepherds told everyone what had happened and what the angel had said to them about this child. All who heard the shepherd's story were astonished. But Mary kept all these things in her heart, and she thought about them often. And then the shepherds went back to their flocks, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, and it was just as the angel had told them. See, I've often wondered, like, I mean, I get the part of the angels announcing Jesus to the shepherds. I mean, now, why they chose the angels, I don't know. Maybe because they were awake. I mean, have you ever thought about that? Like, maybe they're the guys who are up, and that, maybe you could see the angels for miles around, and they're the only guys who are staring at the night sky, just taking care of their sheep still. I don't know. And maybe it's because, and many times we kind of think about this, like they were some of the lowest of the low, like shepherds were not respected. It was not the job you got into if you had any other sort of possibility in life. In fact, that's why it was so amazing that David, the shepherd boy, became the great king of Israel. I don't know why. But when I imagine these shepherds coming to Mary, I've always kind of thought like the wise men, that's a great story, and we like to put them there, but you notice they're nowhere to be found. They actually didn't probably come for 18 months to 2 years later when they were in a house. But here's the thing that's interesting. The shepherds came, and what did they bring? I think it's this. Notice in verse 19 it says, but Mary kept all these things in her heart, and she thought about them often. See, this thing that they brought to her is a pretty powerful thing. They brought to her this idea, and we're going to kind of build on this month from this idea of the worst Christmas, and you and I have all experienced that what's powerful is an idea of bringing purpose and meaning to a pretty bad situation. Like if we were writing the story, if we were writing a good Christmas story, we would want the Savior to come and eliminate human suffering, to give gifts and presents to all the good little girls and boys, to change things, to make the life of Mary and Joseph, this young couple, better. But instead it seems to make it worse. But notice when the shepherds come to Mary, they go, hey, guess what? We saw angels, and they announced the birth of this kid that you believe is the Messiah because an angel came to you. And guess what? He said we'd find him here in the manger. So this is no mistake. Guess what, lady? Like this was all part of God's plan, and there's meaning and there's purpose in your suffering. Like the worst night. I mean, we imagine like everything's over and life is good, and they somehow set up a Christmas tree and put presents around it on the. No. Like they're just recovering from this horrible night of having a child in a barn, and then shepherds show up and go, oh my goodness, you are so blessed. You can't even imagine how amazing. See, I think what we find is like the first worst Christmas becomes unforgettable. Thanks in part to the shepherds. The shepherds who came in, and they brought this thing that's really powerful, but we don't think about it a lot in the story. They brought this thing we call encouragement, right? Like, hey, guess what? We believe too. And hey, guess what we heard from the angel? And hey, this is part of the plan. And it kind of gives me hope. And in fact, it sort of makes sense. It sort of makes sense that, even though I can't prove it, that good things come out of the worst Christmases. Because I don't know what your Christmas is like. I've had some great Christmas. I spent Christmas at Disney one year. And it was one of those years when it was actually sort of cool over Christmas in Florida, believe it or not. And it was just such a neat trip. And you know what I remember about that? Not much. I know we went, and I remember it really sucks to bring Christmas presents home when you've already filled the entire car filled with everything else. And I invented something on that trip. That's the only thing I really remember is I invented shrinking you're shrinking your dirty clothes in a garbage bag. I don't know if I invented it, but I took a shop vac and a garbage bag because we had this giant garbage bag of dirty clothes, and I shrunk it down to like a pretty much like a dying star. It was like Thor's hammer. It was so dense, and I was like, this is awesome. It packs great. It was super heavy, and then our clothes were so wrinkled, she had to wash them like 37 times. But that's what I remember about that trip, and we spent a week in Disney over Christmas. Oh my goodness, that's amazing. So I guess that wasn't the best Christmas. And we've had Christmases that we had plenty, and I don't remember what I got or what I gave, honestly. I remember probably the worst Christmas we've ever had. My wife's mother died on Christmas Eve at our house. And nobody wanted to have dinner because she died in our dining room. We literally went to a Chinese buffet the next day. And you would think that's the worst Christmas, and it was. But I look back and I learn stuff, and I remember things. I remember how strong my wife was in that whole situation. I'm like, oh, I want to be like that. And I realized I left that night. I was not there when my mother-in-law passed, because I went and I was leading worship, and I was like, oh, only I can do that. And I went and led worship for a church and wasn't there when my mother-in-law died. And I was like, ooh, that was a dumb thing to do. I learned something. And when my father-in-law died, I actually was supposed to be preaching, and I was home because I learned that lesson. So I learned something that Christmas. Also, I still remember, my mother-in-law was an amazing woman. She had presents for all of us under the tree the day after she died. She didn't do it during the night. That would have been scary and weird. She had planned it. That would be a whole different story, and we wouldn't stay there at all. But she had planned ahead. I remember before she went in the hospital the last time, and before she came, with hospice, she's like, I have all the gifts wrapped on. Go get them at my house. And I'm like, her generosity, I still remember. I remember so much about that worst Christmas. And I can honestly say that, 14 years later, good things came out of it. Didn't feel like it at the time. Felt like the worst thing that could happen. So here's the thing that I know from this Christmas story. That when we imagine a Christmas story, when we imagine good things happening, we imagine sort of human suffering being completely eliminated. We imagine gifts and presents for the whole world. We imagine Christmas magic. We imagine something happening and everything's good from then on. But that's not what the Christmas story of the Bible is about. In fact, I really think if you look at it from Mary and Joseph's point of view, they were a pretty happy couple heading to be married, and God wrecked their life. Now, I'm sure that they wouldn't trade that for anything to be the earthly father and the mother of Jesus, but my goodness, what a mess. So clearly, God is not entirely concerned with just eliminating all human suffering, because he didn't seem to make things much better for Mary or Joseph or the shepherds. I mean, the shepherds went back with this amazing story, but it's not like they drove out of there and Jeep Cherokees for their trouble. They literally, they were poor shepherds. But I do find the Christmas story bringing something that's pretty amazing. It says Mary kept that night in her heart and remembered it often. Or I like the old translation, the King James translation that I remember says she treasured those things in her heart. See, those guys brought an encouragement to her that she could never forget. She's like, this is real. Because she had to doubt, right? Later she had to doubt, is this thing that happened real? Is it real that this baby that came in on a terrible trip we went on, and this baby that caused us to have to leave our country, because guess what? In the next few weeks we'll see soldiers are chasing this baby. Talk about worst Christmas. But she had to wonder, is this real? And she'd think back going, oh, remember that night? And remember when the shepherds showed up and they told me they'd heard all about us. From a mile away, they heard about us, and that angels had announced this. And so I don't know where you are in the story. And I want the band to come back up here. Maybe you're in sort of that worst Christmas yourself. And none of us would pick that, right? None of us would pick that. And you're looking forward to Christmas in a way I don't even want it to happen this year because it's a bad, bad time for us. Or maybe you feel a little guilty because you're like, yeah, things are going great for me, Don. Like, I got this bonus and you wouldn't believe we're going on a trip, or we've got the best thing coming. Like, I feel a little bad because everybody else is struggling, but man, I'm having a great year. Here's the thing. There's something in this story that I think can help all of us. This idea of encouragement, of bringing purpose and meaning even to human suffering. Of going, hey, this isn't a mistake. This is not just, hey, you're dealing with a bad situation. It doesn't matter. Like, no. There's a plan here for those of us who still believe. And so, if you're having a worse Christmas or you think you are, I hope that we can bring encouragement to you. And we're going to try to do that as a group this year. But maybe you're embarrassed, or maybe we won't find out. But I know some people who are having what I would consider worse Christmas. And I love how Tyler did the graphics this year. If you notice, there's socks and underwear in the graphics this year. And you kind of go, it's kind of a cliche, but socks and underwear Christmas is kind of the worst Christmas we can imagine. We did a $40 Christmas one time years and years ago when we were so painfully broke, and it turned out great because our son was very little and he didn't know. And we went to the dollar store and we got $41 things and we wrapped him up and he's like, woo, this is the biggest Christmas ever. And it was all broken in a week, which is the same that happened no matter how much you spend at that age. So it was great. But we're going to have a socks and underwear Christmas here at Action Church. Because there are some people, in fact, there's way too many people living on the streets. I'm not talking about in LA or in Florida or in Virginia. In York. We know who they are. In fact, we're with an organization that feeds people every week. And what they've told us is that one of the biggest needs that these people have. Now you and I go, well, wouldn't it be great? Like we could build homes for all of them? We can't. Wouldn't it be great if we could make sure all of them got a job? And that would be, yeah, I get that. I'd love to do that. I don't know how we do that, but I do know they have a need that we can meet. And it's going to be a little bit inconvenient and cost a little bit of money, but oh my goodness, it can change things and it can encourage them. They need socks and long underwear. Biggest need. Biggest need is socks and long underwear. And so I want to do that as a church this year. We've agreed that we're going to build them a stockpile of white tube socks. And we're going to give you, and it's funny because I know some of you are completely different. Like when I heard about it, I was like, I want a link on Amazon so I could just push it and buy it. And I was talking to someone else this week. And they're like, oh, I know 3 places that have sales on socks, and I'm going to go shopping there. I'm like, that's so funny because like that sounds like a nightmare to me. And you seem like you're going on an elk hunt and you're excited about it. So we're going to allow you to do either thing. But white tube socks, and we're going to have it out on social all week, and we'll do updates on the app. So please make sure you're signed up for the app. But we need packets, big packets of white tube socks and long underwear of all different sizes. Now, those can be colored if you wish. But that's the thing that men, women, everyone can have. We can encourage them with them. And then we're going to do a packaging party here either after Christmas or that afternoon so that we can get them to them. So maybe you want to help with that. And so just as a group, maybe we can't change the world. Maybe we can't eliminate human suffering. Maybe we can't make everything okay for everybody. But we need a whole lot of socks and underwear. And maybe, from what I've heard, it just feels good for them to go, hey, somebody was thinking of me this Christmas. So I want to pray with you. And I want to start this journey together going, guess what? If you're in the worst Christmas situation, good things actually can come out of that. In fact, that's the whole sort of story. And if you're not, if you're going, what can I do? Because I'm actually really blessed this year. Great. Help us. Help us do something sort of small yet amazing for some people who really are in a worse Christmas situation. Dear Lord, God, this story is amazing. And it's so powerful when we think of the actual humans involved. God, we are so grateful that you sent Jesus. And I'm very grateful that we have this story. And God, even though we'd like to eliminate all human suffering, the good news is grateful that you have a plan for that because we do a lousy job of it here on earth. But God, I pray for everyone here today. God, I pray for those who are in difficult situation. Maybe it's bad relationships or bad situations or bad things they just are struggling to deal with. And I know this season can be very, very daunting when those things are happening. God, we pray that you and us would bring encouragement to them. And God, for those of us who are blessed, for those of us who are maybe blessed beyond what we even deserve, God, help us to be generous and loving and bring encouragement to people who are having a very difficult time. In your name we pray, amen.